everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Courtney Pollock, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Sage 100 Future, When Change Makes Sense and When It Doesn't, presented by ERP Advisors Group and SWK. So we're going to get started in just a few minutes, not too long. I'd love to hear where you're joining us from today. I see people already sounding off on the chat. So I see Denver, Colorado. I am located in Loveland, Colorado, an East Coast transplant. Sean, who I'll bring on stage in just a moment, I know is also located in Colorado. Our other speaker today is located in Greensboro, North Carolina. So we've got Mountain Time Zone and the East Coast covered. If we've got anyone out there on the West Coast, maybe some people maybe in the Central Time Zone, some Chicago. Just love to hear where you're coming from. Get active in the chat. We will have a Q&A portion at the end, so all of you sending a chat are already right up ahead of the game. So if you have a question at any point during the webinar, you can drop it in the chat, you can drop it in the Q&A, put it wherever it makes sense to you, and we're going to cover all those questions. I have a couple other things to go over before we dive in and bring today's great speakers on. So everyone is on mute. I'm sure you've noticed. That's just to keep the background noise to a minimum, keep things focused. But as you can tell, we still want to hear from you. So take advantage of that chat, take advantage of the Q&A section. And then this presentation is also going to be recorded. So we're going to record today's conversation and all the great Q&A questions, and we'll send that out to you tomorrow afternoon, whether you're able to attend or not. So if you're watching this recording, great, you got it. If you've got some coworkers that maybe weren't able to join us today, they'll get the recording too tomorrow afternoon. We'll also share some other awesome resources from the ERP Advisors Group for you to check out in that email. So don't miss it. It's coming to you. And then next, I think it's about time. It looks like we've got a good group joined so far. So we're going to go ahead and bring today's speakers on. Let me bring John and Sean on stage. Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey, Courtney.
Hi,
Awesome. Perfect. So I want to give a little bit of an intro to today's speakers before we dive right in. So Sean is the founder and managing principal of ERP Advisors Group. They are located in Lakewood, Colorado. Also in Colorado with me. ERP Advisors Group is one of the country's top independent boutique enterprise software advisory firms, and Sean has worked in the enterprise software industry for almost 30 years now. And then on the SWK side, we have John Shepperson, who is SWK's Senior Vice President of Business Development. He also has nearly 3 decades of experience in the ERP space, particularly with Sage 100, Sage Intacct, and Acumatica. And I'm sure most of you are on Sage 100, as this is Sage 100 Future webinar. John is located in Greensboro, North Carolina, and works closely with SWK's Strategic Technology Advisory Team, which is a great complementary resource here at SWK, and we'll mention a bit later on. So we have 2 great speakers here today with almost 60 years of combined experience in the ERP space. A chuckle, right? That sounds really long, guys.
It is.
So we've got a lot of experience, and we brought them here today because we've been hearing from Sage 100 customers, Sage 100 users over the past few years, tons of different questions about what the future really looks like for Sage 100 and other legacy software systems. And there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of options. There's hosting, there's cloud ERP, there's, just upgrading your Sage 100. There's tons of different options, and it's not one size fits all. So we brought together, all this expertise to really dive into options, what that looks like, how to choose which one's right for you, and how to make those big decisions for you and your business. So let's dive in. I think I'm going to start with you, John, and get the conversation going. Let's start with the big one. There's been a lot of announcements around Sage 100 end of life. Can you talk a bit about the impact of those announcements and what support currently looks like for Sage 100 users and kind of the future of Sage 100 itself?
Sure. Thanks, Courtney. Well, first of all, there is no end of life. I think that's probably some competition out there throwing some shade. Right now, supported platforms are versions 2023, 2024, and 2025. And the way it works is that as a new release comes out, the bottom one drops off from a supported platform perspective. So as long as you keep on those upgrade patterns, which is 12, 18 months or so, then you're going to be supported by Sage. Now, SWK and other VARs will support folks with unsupported platforms, but there's risk in that. I would say that keeping your Sage 100 upgrade is more like an insurance policy against something bad happening. So even though we can support a unsupported platform, if something happens or we run into a wall, we have no recourse. We can't go to Sage. There's nothing we can do. So to some degree, you need to keep up with the upgrades just as an insurance policy to make sure nothing bad were to happen and you were to go completely down. That being said, we will always try to help you. Some of the other things, some of the other reasons to keep track of it is things like Windows hot fixes and updates that can affect how things work. Sage 100 was architected back in around 1985. That's 40 years ago, which is quite a long time. So, technology has improved since then, and Sage tries to keep up with everything as best they can. And so, you really want to try to keep up to date on your upgrades as much as possible.
Great, thank you. And then, with that said, there's also that question of cloud ERP versus, on-prem, like most people Sage 100. So, Sean, I think I'm going to pass it over to you to say, can you tell us a bit about why customers choose to either move to a cloud ERP or stay on a solution like Sage 100?
Yeah. We really do try. I think as you mentioned, Courtney, my firm, we're independent objective. We love working with John and you and the rest of the SWK team. And we work with a lot of different products, right? And we're always looking for what's the best fit for clients. And there are many instances where we have to look at on-prem versus in the cloud. Really, for every client, we have to look at that. And some clients have specific requirements that sort of drive towards a deployment. That's the fancy word we use for where we stick the software. Sometimes they, want to stick it someplace else but we try for that not to happen. Like, don't put it in the garbage. We can make this work, guys. But projects and putting in new software, it's difficult regardless of where the software is deployed, right? And so the thing we have to look at for sure ultimately is certain applications are really only offered on the cloud, right? Whereas other applications, you do have some options on where you do the deployment. I don't know if we're going to get into that in too much detail, John, but you could talk about that with some of the products you guys offer. But I think ultimately what the trend is and the pattern that we see is for folks that are on a Sage 100 and they're looking at the next step for upgrades and different options. A lot of people do look to the cloud because for years and years and years, they've had their own hardware, or maybe they've used somebody else's, like in the data center or something. But that problem of hardware and supporting the hardware and supporting the environmental software that runs the business application, the ERP, it's a thing. Like it doesn't just happen automatically. Somebody has to make sure that those machines and everything else are maintained. So a lot of clients that we work with, especially as they're getting busier, there's less staff, there's a lot of stuff that people have to be concerned about. The cloud is pretty interesting from that perspective, and that somebody else, these are very well qualified resources, are taking care of your software in the cloud. And I can remember, again, I don't want to reflect on I think John's got a few more years than I do, thankfully. So you can be that one in the room, John, if you want to. But I can remember probably, 20 years ago working with clients and them saying things like, well, I've got a lot to do and I'm really concerned about my software, and I want to make sure that my security is the best that it can be. Therefore, I'm going to go into the cloud. And these were from clients that were very conservative and very, cost conscious. and they were seeing this value proposition for the cloud decades ago. So it's proven, it's been there, it works, et cetera. But, ultimately you have to look at your own organization and what's best for you, because there are options that you should take a look at. So we don't really have a horse in the race other than clients being successful. And so, we just really want folks to look at, we have some clients that I'm going to say all the bad things here, but they have to take their software and they have to build it out a lot to meet their requirements. John, let's plug our ears when we talk about customizations, right? But sometimes there are scenarios where you really do need the app to be on-prem for whatever reason it is, right? And then there's a lot more scenarios that we see, honestly, where, in the cloud kind of makes sense. I mean, that's what we've experienced.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think we've got some questions around customizations coming down the pipe. And some people referring to, Mass 90. So, if you know what Mass 90 is, you've definitely been around the Sage 100 world for a while. So we've got some of those out in the audience, which is great. And I do, we're going to do Q&A at the end, but I do want to address one question I see in the chat because we already talked about it. When we're talking Sage 100 supported version, someone said Sage 100 version 2021. 7.0010. Does this mean I'm not supported? So that is outside of Sage's support range. And if you're an SWK customer, I think that you are right on the dot of our ending of support. So I think we actually just sent out an announcement around our latest support version. And there's a lot of reasons around that. Like John talked, Sage no longer supports it. It becomes difficult for, us to support it as well after it's a few years past Sage's support timeline. Okay, let's keep on going. So we've talked a little bit about, the difference between why you would go to a cloud ERP versus staying on your current Sage 100 solution. There is another layer to that, which is, having a hosted Sage 100 versus, a true cloud ERP. So John, can you talk a little bit about the difference of having a hosted solution versus being in the cloud?
Sure. So many of you already use us for hosting your Sage 100 and potentially other applications, but the biggest difference between the two is really just the structure, and the architecture is the same, but it's the structure and where it is, and the resources, whether it's shared or not. So in a hosted environment, you have your own little universe that we create for you. We're doing all the updates to the Windows, and it's a virtual server. We're doing all that stuff. You're coming in, on a VPN and probably a remote desktop or something similar. And it's your little world. We still have to do an upgrade. It's a process exactly like it is now. It's just that you don't have the server in the room with the blinking lights on. So the cloud is more of a shared resource environment. So like a Sage Intacct that we sell, you do not have any choice. It is cloud, or it's all cloud or nothing. There is no on-premise option whatsoever. It's a giant Oracle database with tons of different data structures and different data centers and things like that. So but in Acumatica, while they're in Amazon Web Services, they are also, you can do it on premise or you can have it hosted. So that's a very different point for Acumatica as opposed to Sage Intacct. But in either case, it's usually a multi-tenant environment, meaning that it's not just you and your little world together. It is in you're next door to another company, you're next door to another company doing everything. But the scale and the flexibility is the plus side of that. So you can add users and transactions and everything, and it just expands their scalability to expand your resources is there. So that's the biggest difference in how all of that works.
Great. Yeah. And I know if you've been to a past Sage 100 webinar with us where we're talking about these kind of things, you've probably heard from Noah Corwig about hosting. So if that's something you want to learn a bit more in detail about, we do have resources out there for it. And I'll plug where you can find some of those later on. Okay. I think this is probably, to me, I think this is a big one on everyone's mind. So Sean, I'm going to let you speak to it if you think so. And that is, what does it really cost to upgrade your ERP? And I think there's a lot of different avenues with that, but can you talk about kind of the real cost of these different options?
Absolutely. I think before I even jump into some of the specifics on it, you really do need to be open-minded about these upgrades and what the benefits are going to be, right? It's so easy to drive into costs. Like when we sit down with clients, they're like, "Oh, hi, I'm Jane Smith, and oh, hi, I'm Sean Windle. How much is this going to cost?" We're like, "Oh, okay, hold on a second. We got to get to know you a little bit before we dive in." So costs are definitely they're a hot topic. So I would say, we're in about, I don't know, I think about 50 or 55 different clients right now. I know you guys are servicing a lot of clients, and I like to tell the truth. And I like folks to really understand what they're about to get into before they get into it, so that when they do get into it and they get through it, they're not as surprised. So there's a couple different cost categories I'm going to talk about at a high level first to start. So you got to pay for the software, right? That's going to happen. There's no doubt about it. There's also technical implementation costs with a firm like you guys with SWK. There's usually costs with firms like us with advisory work up front and helping figure out what you should do and which software you should select, and but also with maybe some implementation, some client-side implementation costs. That's another category, which are things like bonuses. And for most of the people on these calls, if you're involved in an implementation, it's like your second job. So, however you do it without being too self-serving, be a little self-serving to say it's nice when you have your day job and then you have a night job of implementing ERP. There might be some additional compensation that you have for your team. You might have to backfill some people. You might have to pay for other costs that for training, even getting people in big rooms together that can require a lot of cost. And then, of course, there's the ongoing cost of the software every year. So applications like Intact or Acumatica or many others, there's an annual cost that you pay as part of your subscription. So those are some of the cost categories. And it's there's a reason for each one of those costs, right? This is where we start to get into conversations with clients, and you start building out the model of what's included in the costs. And I look for indicators. My whole team, we look for our clients' indicators when we start talking about, well, the software, the recurring subscription annual could be this amount. And whoa, wait a minute. I wasn't thinking it would be that much. We're like, okay, tell me more about that, right? We're like management consultants. We'd like to ask the touchy-feely questions. And as the data starts coming off, we have a very limited budget. We don't have a lot of time. We're spending a lot of money on some other initiatives right now. It might not be time to do an ERP project, right? I get to say that as the independent objective guy. But costs are something that are very hard to forecast. I'm being totally honest with you right now, because nobody has ever implemented, John, you mentioned Acumatica. Nobody's implemented Acumatica at your company, the folks that are listening to this, that are coming off of the application that you're coming off of with the mods. I see a question about mods in here that you have. So there's a little bit of estimating that you're doing. So the last cost category that we suggest is that there is sort of a padding that you're including in your budget. It might be 20, 30% of the total number, because you will run into things that nobody thought about. Now, some clients will say, whoa, there's no way I can take this on because there's too much unknown. And I would say, okay, don't. But you do have to look at the benefit side that I started with for this reason, which is, are you running on software that when you hire people, they're interested in using it, right? Are you on applications that are meeting all of your business requirements? Organizations, our clients have changed dramatically over the last 10, 15 years, unequivocally. Every single one of them is almost in a different business, it feels like. They might have some of their core business in place, but they've grown and expanded and they have different channels that they're selling through. I mean, I could go through a whole bunch of things there, but business has changed and their software app maybe hasn't as much. So you have to measure the cost by the benefits. Don't just look at the cost side of the equation. Look at the benefits. Of course, you can try to monetize benefits. There's a whole thing we talk about on our website about that. It's, especially for some of our private equity backed clients, we have to do kind of a formal business case like that. But it should be obvious what the benefits of a new ERP are. And if they're not, then might not be the right thing to do. So you've got to look at costs. You've got to look at the benefit side. And it should be so obvious what the difference is that anybody across the organization can understand that before you ask them to have a nighttime job, because everybody's going to be working on this thing while the company's moving forward. Sometimes we talk about, it's like replacing the airplane engine in flight. So if we're going to ask people to do that, it better be an obvious business benefit.
And to that point, Sean, I think I want to pass it over to John because we're talking about, the cost of changing. But John, can you speak a little bit about the cost of staying on a legacy system like Sage 100?
Yeah, it's really the flip side of the coin of what Sean was talking about on all the points, right? It's, first of all, what I said earlier, what if something happens and you're not supported and it breaks down and, you're in a mess. So, I mean, that's one thing, but also things like, you're in a distributed environment now. You used to be in one building. Now there's been a merger. Now you've got, Greensboro and Chicago instead of just Greensboro. So that becomes harder to use Sage 100 in that environment because you have, a whole different layer of technology that you have to do for access. Things like integrating to current systems like e-commerce. The internet didn't exist when Sage 100 was originally architected. So getting to the cloud app integration with Sage 100 can be messy sometimes. I'm sure many of you on the call, if you've done it, we have lots of tools that we use and we can absolutely do it. But, there comes a point where you Frankenstein things a little too much and need to get things back under control a little bit. And then the other thing about what Sean was talking about, if you're trying to interview, I've got a 21-year-old kid that's graduating college next year, and he's never known anything about a client server application or, logging into a PC and all that kind of stuff. So there comes a point where you're going to have a hard time attracting talent if you're running an older system. And then compliance and regulation type stuff, if, that may or may not be kept up with. So you have to watch that if you're in a particular industry, that HIPAA or any of the food type stuff out there. You have to be careful with that data and make sure that you're doing what you need to do to protect that data. And then I think that's about it for that. Yeah.
No, that's a lot of good points on both sides. I think it's quite funny to think about this existing before the internet, as someone also probably definitely not with 30 years of experience. So it's great. I think I could keep asking you guys questions all day long, but I do want to dive into, some of the questions we have from the audience to make sure we get those covered, and we'll see what we're left with. So we've talked a little bit about the Sage 100 versions. I know this was mentioned, but someone asked about modifications. So can you talk a little bit about what it looks like when you have a lot of customizations or modifications in your current Sage 100 and you're looking to move?
John, why don't I take that?
I can take that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So if you're going to be, if you're going to move your Sage 100 to a hosting environment, there's absolutely no change whatsoever. The mods that you've done are in the code and it's put in the system. And Sean can speak a little bit more about this too, but when we go into a customer that's looking to go to a new system, we really don't, we look at the modifications, but we don't put too much stock into it because the new systems have a lot of capabilities that Sage 100 doesn't have. So we really take a holistic view of where you're at now, what you need. Most of the time, most of the modifications are not needed when you go to a new system because things have progressed over the years. You're able to drop ISVs maybe that you have added, workflow and things like that, or maybe reporting and some other things. I mean, there's a lot of different items that we look at, but we really don't spend too much time on your mods if you're going to a new system. But if it's hosted, then it's all good. There's no difference at all.
Mm-hmm. I would say too on that question, it's a good question there. I'm getting a little bit of an echo.
Yeah, John, I might have you mute in between. I think it might be coming on your end.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you. So here's the thing. Again, I get to speak to you as an advisor, as somebody who I am solely paid to help folks in my company. We just help you do the right thing, and that's not that's the real deal is what I'm trying to say. Like for unequivocal likeness, if that's a word, you're going to do the right thing with you when you work with a firm like us. And we get to have the lovely responsibility of dispelling misconceptions in the ERP space. I think we have this whole thing on the misconceptions of ERP. And when it comes to customizations, just like John said, a lot of people have built out these apps to meet their very, very, very specific needs over, 5, 10, 25 years, right? I think we had a client who was an old Mass 90, went to Sage 100, client where they had been using the software for over 30 years. They went from maybe 2 or 3 million, upwards of 50 million, tons of growth. And they were worried about these customizations. And like John said, our job was to say, not yet. Like you're going to get so much more in a new modern application than you ever had before that you need to start with this new baseline, get into it, see what's happening. And of course, if there's some unusual thing for landed cost calculations, that's always fun, right? Or in some pricing situations, fine, right? Like do your homework before you start, or even during the implementation, to identify a major gap. Fine, pay John and his team to, not John anymore. Maybe you do customizations at night, John. No, he doesn't. Okay, good. That's probably better for everybody. Just kidding. It's like me. If it's in COBOL, I can do it. That's how old I am. Courtney, that was an old software solution. We're fine. Old programming language. Just kidding. Not really. But the key point is that there are probably a few gaps for sure. And you will identify those as you do a diligent process with your demonstrations, even before you buy the apps. But just know that it is a new world that you're going into. And it's a scary world. And, I think you should stay up at night worrying about these things. I really do, because that shows that you care. But again, on the other side of the equation is, what's your organization going to do in the future if we're on applications that are 10, 20 years old? At some point, there has to be an upgrade that occurs. And most likely the people that are on these webinars and listening, these applications probably the best. And I would even wage to offer that it's probably part of your hat in your organization to look at the future-proofing your organization with getting new software so that you can ride into the future with these applications. Is it going to be more? It just is. I'm just here to tell you that today, because you're paying for recurring costs every year. You probably paid for Sage 100 or even some of the other legacy apps, I don't know, like 20, 30 years ago, right? Now you're paying maintenance every year. You're paying John and his team, again, more John's team, to come in and do some maintenance and things. And, you've had it pretty good. That's been phenomenal. And it's sort of like, okay, that's it. Like now going forward, the model has changed, but there's reasons for that. You are getting annual updates. You're getting the ability to plug into e-com. You're getting planning and scheduling for some of the manufacturers out there, for distributors, all kinds of EDI and integrations that your customers are requiring and things like that. They're all there, and maybe not all of it. There's going to be some stuff, but that's the point. Is you have to take a bit of a myopic view and go woo and kind of look across like the whole value chain of what you're doing today versus before, and say, we might just have to do it. And if you do it right, you're going to be preventing additional employees that you have to hire. You're still going to hire people. AI is not going to. My view is we're not all going to go away anytime soon. But there's different views on that. We're not talking about AI, but I had to bring it up. But the bottom line is that if you think about this correctly and the benefits are there, and you get a system in, like let's take that old software, let's put it in its place. We might need to do a little bit of a memorial service for it. But now getting into the new and going forward, you're in a position where your organization can scale and that the software is not holding you back. And that's the thing where if you've been on these apps for a long time, sometimes you don't even see that. So just be aware of that.
That's a great answer. And, as we come up on time here, I'm going to do a quick plug, and then I think we'll take, one or two questions. We'll go a little bit past. If you have to, jump, you've got other things to get to, no worries. We're going to send you the recording. And if we didn't get to your question, because there's a lot of great questions, we will make sure someone follows up and answers that question for you. So no worries on that. The one thing I just want to plug real fast is that we did launch a poll during the Q&A. So we'd love to hear your response. And that's just, what's most valuable for your business right now. And I want to call out two things there. One option is that we can connect you with Sean's team at ERP Advisors Group. So they are a great resource. Again, like you said, they're doing a webinar with us, but they are completely independent advisors. So if you would like to be put in contact with them, just let us know in the poll and we'll make sure to make that connection. And then also there is an offer for a free strategic consultation. So if you're not aware, SWK does have what we call our STAT team. That's our strategic advisory team. That is a complimentary resource to customers, future customers, and that will take a look at your entire technology stack. I think I saw a question in there, I don't remember exactly how it was worded, but does SWK do, full-blown 0 to 100 implementations from stage 100 to cloud, or piecemeal? And that's something where if you have that type of meeting, you can really look at, what makes sense for your business. Maybe it is a smaller, move. This is something John can talk really well to, or, maybe it's a fuller picture. So that's really just a great one-on-one conversation that's kind of like this, but specific to you and your business. So anyone that's participating in the poll make me very happy. I love when people do my polls, and we'll take like one more question or so. Just go a couple minutes over. I think this is a fun one, so I want to address it even though we're a bit past time. Is someone said, what happens when the internet goes down? So I think this is one, especially as people on on-prem solution, I think this is a big one we should address and just get out the way.
John, do you want to take a crack at that? And I've got another.
Yeah, sure. Well, your internet provider and your internet connectivity becomes your most important piece of IT at that point. All of these systems, especially if you're on, one of the like Intact or Acumatica or whatever, their uptime is 99.99. That's not going to be your problem. They're not going to be your problem. You're going to be your problem. So a lot of people, what they do will have a failover with a mobile provider like Verizon, so that if your internet kicks out, then the Verizon kicks in. So, I don't think you can 100% take out the risk, because things could happen, but that's what most people do. And you may, if you're going to go from an on-premise to one of these solutions, you probably want to increase your internet pipe with your provider, because that's what will make it either slow or fast is the internet pipe.
And John, I would add to that, if you hear what John said and you're like, but John, that's even more costs and it's already adding up and I'm really concerned about it. That's where, again, in my position, I get to say, well, then don't do it. Because it's easy for me to say, right? We don't get the services, but we will only do the right thing for a client. And if our sponsor that we're talking to is worried about upgrading to, to more access internet wise, whatever that is it's a relatively minor cost. You don't have the stomach to do an ERP project, because you will get into this and there could be, some amount of cost that you hadn't thought about that has to get covered, right? So it's these kinds of questions. What I'm looking for is that of course it can get handled. And everybody is handling backup and everything with getting on the internet. Look at this call here that we're doing today. You all are getting here through the internet. Oh, but that's for a, webinar. It's not for getting in my financials. Hey, I get you. But you're doing a lot of banking today online. Well, I can always go into the bank. Okay, but not really, right? So I would just ask you to, there's actually a good book called The Question Behind the Question. And what is the real question behind your question of what happens if the internet goes down? Like, what are you really the most concerned about? Because if you can't handle the risk of changing to a new ERP, even talking about it, when you get into the project and it turns out, wow, we have to redesign our bill of materials and we have to go through our item master. Yeah, you're going to have to do that. But remember, you're doing this for the long-term benefit of your organization. That's why you go through these projects. That there's thousands of organizations that do these projects every year. There's billions, hundreds. Well, it's actually less than 100 billion spent in ERP in North America alone every year. I've run the research. But why is there that much money spent on this? Because it benefits your organization. So yeah, have a backup for your internet. Done. What's the next problem, right? You have to look at it that way for sure. Don't look at it like, well, what happens if the software vendor gets hit by a cybersecurity? Sure, you can get their SOC 1 and SOC 2 report. You should do that research. I agree. But I think they're getting hit by more risks than you and your organization are. So I'd be more worried about how you as an organization are preventing your cybersecurity attacks than Intact or Acumatica. They've got teams of people that are preventing that. So look at the why you're asking that question. And I really think you're asking that question because you don't really want to change. And find out the real why you don't want to change. I'm busy. I don't have time. We don't have the money. Okay, then don't do it, right? Or if it's just, I'm really afraid and I don't want this to go wrong for my organization, that's phenomenal. You should have that viewpoint. Then you go in with your eyes wide open. You do webinars like this. You guys have a ton of stuff on your website, erpadvisorsgroup.com. We have a ton of helpful stuff too. And you can get the help and the resources for it.
Great. Thank you, Sean. And I know we have more questions, but for sake of time, we're going to leave it there for today. But like Sean said, we have a ton of resources, past webinars like this, where we talk really in depth about the differences between like hosting and cloud ERP, and Sean's team has shared some great resources. So when we send out that recording to you all tomorrow afternoon, some of those resources will be linked in there. And again, I'm just going to plug one more time. If you want to have that meeting with Sean's team or meet with the strategic advisory team to talk about your specific scenario, just let us know in the poll, because we've talked a lot about, the benefits and why there's that modernization to cloud ERP, but they're all those in betweens, keeping your Sage 100 up to date and getting those new features and making sure you don't lose that support, moving to something like hosting, which can help you prepare for cloud ERP down the line. So there is, a lot of middle ground there and a lot to explore depending on your situation. If you're that person like Sean, that's like kind of unsure, you're really looking at those questions. Sean raised a lot of good points. I'm have to check out that book, The Why of Why, or The Why Behind the Question. I have to read it now. I'm going to have to look back, find the name. But this has been really great to have both of you on here and share your expertise. I wish we had a whole another hour to dive into all these questions. If your question didn't get answered, we will reach out. Don't worry, I'll make sure, you get the right answer there. And then thank you, everyone. Thank you, John. Thank you, Sean. We have a wonderful
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Found this informative.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.